is International Master Valeri Lilov, and welcome to today's lecture. What I like to bring are a few very valuable ideas on the most common type of mistakes that people, especially players of an intermediate or beginner level, tend to make, and ultimately what you can do to avoid them. So I'm going to talk to you about these common sins, so to speak. We're going to begin with the concept of development. Now, a lot of times people feel that they are aware of what development is and they know how to do it. So they study a lot of opening books and a lot of different variations in attempt to just broaden their knowledge. Unfortunately, that often doesn't help. And the reason why it doesn't help is because they don't understand the fundamental idea that makes an opening successful. So let's begin with the fundamental idea of what is or what makes an opening successful. The first thing is you need to understand it's all about structure. And what I mean by structure isn't just the idea of, okay, you need to get the pawns right. Okay, that matters for sure. But what's even more important is that you make sure you actually get the pieces right. You make sure that you know, okay, what are my pieces going to do when they get in there? What is the long-term value that I'm looking for? If you do that, it's going to help you a lot. And there are methods on how you can achieve this. So let's talk about that. First, we start with the open games. I always recommend look at the open games because when you look up at the open games, you will likely end up with an easier position to play because you're fighting for initiative. So, yeah, actually after E4, now people can do a whole lot of different things, and I always recommend have at least one good opening to meet those. However, let's talk about the complex lines. Now, if your opponent goes offbeat, it's going to be rather easy to play against offbeat lines. But when the opponents choose a line which is like this, C5, major line, which many people do because they like to follow what grandmasters play, then it throws us off. So unless we actually study 100 of book lines, we're going to feel a little lost. So the first thing in order to get a significant opening formations, instead of studying all these huge book lines, which are both difficult and hard to remember and understand, my recommendation is go by following the principles. First principle, you need to develop your pieces quick and make sure they get closer to the center. That's a very necessary thing to do. Center means those 4 squares, so our goal is to get our pieces close to that area. The sooner we do it, the better it is going to be. Now, after we do that type of thing, but the opponent can again choose many different things, and that's okay. Let's say he'll pick to play this. What do we do then? When they go in such a way, usually what you would want to pick is a fast move. Move that does not spend any extra time in moving around and getting it around. Just like straight to the point. We need the center. We break in the center. And once we actually break in the center, we get the freedom and the ability to challenge and shoot at our opponent. For instance, knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3. Bishop pawn to e6, and then we could actually do bishop to e3. Now, do I know this line when I'm showing it? You bet I do. I certainly do. But it doesn't matter. Because if you know that all you want is a fast development and the ability to get your pieces as close as possible to the middle of the board, that's all you would want. That's all you will ever need to do. And the truth is that after we get going with a move like bishop to the e3, reaching out and bringing our pieces close to that, the rest is easy. Let's imagine you will play with the move of bishop to the e7, and then we can actually come up with a move like bishop c4. He will castle. We will do the same. He might play a6. We could play a4. Second thing, don't give him space. If there is one thing that I would call is the most important in any opening, it's the concept of space. It doesn't mean that if you don't have space, you're going to have a bad opening. On the contrary, oftentimes it's the opposite. But space provides you with great ideas. It gives you an easier opening. And that's what you really care to have first. Get an easier opening. Like imagine the move of pawn to the a4. It prevents black from ever reaching b5 and actually getting to attack against you in this type of position. It's very good. Next move, we could focus on queen e2. Possibly the rooks can come out. We could go for moves like f4. And step by step, this is going to help us to actually organize a very good plan. That's something worth going for, worth considering. Now, I want to tell you that every time when you play like that, you're almost ready to be successful. It's really that simple. Develop the pieces, get them close, and have them to attack the opponent. That's all. You do it, and you enjoy it. This is how easy it is supposed to be. But what if we have no idea? Now, there are going to be positions in which we have no idea how to make it work. And when you encounter a position like that, usually with black, let's suppose that we play e4, e5, and our opponent suddenly jumps with bishop c4. Then we have to follow the 3 rules. Develop towards the center, develop more advanced, and make sure you don't engage into any other actions or activity. So this is very necessary. If you engage, you may get yourself in trouble because you're not ready. You're not prepared. So, for instance, if we play knight of 6 here, d3, and then knight of the c6, we're going to get the center in a perfect looking position. We've gotten, a good amount of forces and pieces along the way. And it's good. Is it perfect? No, but it's good enough. So we just do it. Now, with that in mind, essentially the idea is, of course, black-white can do knight f3. Then you can play bishop c5. Now, you're not going to resolve every single problem with this. You want to understand that. But you will resolve most of them because you will have a clear idea on where you're going. For example, if he plays knight castles, you can do h6. Thinking of the opponent's tactical moves is also a very important idea that most chess players don't give enough attention to. And oftentimes what I mean by thinking of the opponent's tactics, I mean just looking really at where can he attack or threaten you, or what he'll try to deliver. So in that specific case, I don't believe that he's got all that much. This could give us a chance to play bishop e6 if it trades, f takes the castling. Okay, is there a better way to go? Possibly, sure. But this one's good. And I want to say it. It is good. It's setting up, it's giving us the action, and that we know, okay, here is where I'm actually bringing my pieces. You don't want to win in the opening, however strange that may sound. All you want is a comfortable development. We didn't engage into anything quick with exception of the exchange, but even the exchange itself still was not that much of a complication. It was just an exchange. And so after the move of castling on that side of the board, we can actually proceed and continue with our development by bringing up the queen on the e8, after which we could actually get that queen over to the g6 or h5. Maybe even our knight can jump in, and we could have a wonderful, easy to look position with different setups. It's a good thing. It's a really good thing to follow. So I like that sort of approach a lot, and I like it for plenty of different reasons. But yes, finish the development. Now, Let's talk about what happens when people finish the development and they still feel like this is not good. I'm going to give an example with one of the openings that was very bothersome to me. I'm talking about the Catalan. Now, Catalan is one of these openings that even if you do get to finish your development, it ain't going to do the job for you. I mean, it still gets you in a situation where you're really feeling like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, and I just don't know. So, what do you really do? After the g3, bishop e7, bishop g2 castles, when you finish up the development, it could be difficult unless you actually think about what moves or what type of possibilities are actually going to be more comfortable. What do I mean by comfortable? Well, let's take a look. If we're thinking right now about the move or the candidate of c6, knight c3, and knight d7, ask yourself, do I find this position comfortable? Now, most likely, the answer is going to be no. And you know why. It's just I don't even have to answer that question. You just see that almost everything's behind. The black dark light square bishop is closed, and there is many other pieces that are just not good. Now, this is clearly worse for black. Very, very worse. Now, are there other ways to go? I mean, of course, there is a way to play with d6 to the c. But let's say that you already got yourself into this kind of position. So how do we go about that? That's a great question. Really great. I suggest that you start thinking about where would you actually want to see your pieces in the next few moves. And that helps a lot. What do I mean by that, where you want to have the pieces go? Well, here's how most people think. When it comes to the opening, people think in terms of, what do I want to do right now? And I think it's bad. What you actually want to do is to think in terms of, where do I want my pieces to be in the next 3 to 5 moves? I call that outlining. And what outlining does is that it helps you not just to prioritize which moves you want to do first, second, third, but also to design the possibilities for your pieces, the squares where these pieces are actually going to go and what they're going to do. It's very important, and most people rarely do it. It's a key concept of such type of position. So you'd like to ask yourself, how do I do that? How do I get this going? And of course, now the simple idea is that we could start with a move like d6 to the c, which is an easier move actually, and it very quickly disposes of the possible like target we could have. In case he plays with something like knight to the d2, we can have even b5 played out. If he plays queen c2, we could do a6. Now, of course, it will be a lot better if you knew this line. That's how I felt the first time when I played it. I was like, if I knew it, I would be just saving myself a lot of trouble, and I wouldn't have to figure this whole thing out from scratch. But considering the simplest concept that I wanted, which was basically to develop my pieces without feeling that I have to resolve a ton of trouble, that helped. I got b5, then I got bishop to the b7. Bishop's actually getting in very well. And then there is moves like knight d7, possibly even c5 that will be played out. And it's so good. It's so easy to do. It's really great. b3, rook c8, and then there could be the move of pawn up to the c5 played out beautifully. I loved this. I loved the way on how it worked, and it was just wonderful to me. The reason why in 100% of most games end up badly in the opening is because people do not care enough about space, about possibilities and things like that. And just if you do that, it's going to be really great in this type of position. And yeah, that's necessary. A move like c5 could also work out perfectly. And yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about the middle game. because I was going to talk about another type of mistake that people do in middle games. Let's say that we end up very well out of the opening. I'm going to play out a sequence of one of my favorite opening lines, the Tartakova variation for black. So we end up in a structure like this. We know that where the pieces are supposed to go. We understand what this all means. And we do the knight d7, we do c5, and we get ourselves to a position like this. So really the question now is, where do I go now? Where do I go from here? This is a complicated question. And the reason why it is a complicated question is because, we look at this from the point of, okay, I want to get going and I want to attack. But it's hard. It's really, really challenging. So what do we do? How do we plan from here onwards? Good question. First thing, you need to understand the 3 stages of a plan progression. The 3 stages are essentially very simple. They happen to be develop, improve, and attack. Now, how does that work? It's fairly simple. Development means we just want to get our pieces developed out there on more advanced positions, like with a move of this kind. After the development's done, what we would want to do very much is to actually think of the way of improving them. Now that's not very easy. But how do we do it? Okay, so let's say we develop, or maybe, how do we improve? The improvement is with moves like knight e4. Now rook c8 may be played or maybe not. You don't need to necessarily complete every single piece. In that particular case, knowing that the knight can actually go on the e4 quickly is a little bit better. So we jump in, we get the attack going very quick. And so, for example, after that's played, bishop takes. Improving means that you simply make your pieces a little more of what they're supposed to be. You get them to the advanced and necessarily powerful positions that they want to be on. With that knight in the middle, with that bishop and the pawn close, and with that rook ready to come in, things start to look good. I have to say, it's just good. And the next move, of course, after that is played out, we could suggest that it's just going to be a couple of different moves. But then we finish the development. We've made the improvement. So what do we do now? It's arguable that improvement is ever finished. I don't think there is a definition of that kind. You can hardly say, I finished the improvement. Okay, there's always something more that you can do, I guarantee you that. But let's talk about this type of position. Planning often goes with a few steps that you need to take on if you're ever going to be successful. The first very important step is to decide, what do you want in a given position? Or not so much what do you want, but what you need. See, in some position you may need to defend. In others you may need to improve. In third, you may need to eventually go on for the attack. Whichever of these things you actually wish to do, you need to be very clear on how to do them. That's a great concept. Now, doing it is of course a lot more difficult than you might think. But that's what you're going for. That's what you would like to achieve. So where? Let's think a little bit more about that. Where do we go? I guess to say that the next very necessary task is that we must pick side. Picking side is hard. There are many reasons, but it's hard. We usually have 3 major areas to focus upon. Queen side, king side, and the center. You can put any color you want on them. Essentially, the idea is that those are the 3 most important sides. And your job, your goal, is to think about each of these three and sort of discover where you will have more possibilities. Again, we're not looking for a winning idea. Most chess players look for a winning move. Don't look for a winning idea. It's not going to be there. We're just thinking about something that will give us enough of a solid play. I'd say if we think right now about the king side, there's really not a whole lot black can achieve out there. If we look at the queen side, too, it doesn't look like there are brilliant prospects. But if you actually get to look at the center, now that's a different story in my opinion, because in the center area of the board, black already has a lot of control. He already has a lot of good pieces that are well situated out there. And if he could advance and get a little bit more space towards that, it is definitely not going to hurt. So you see, in my opinion, choosing the right side of the board could be a great deal. And finally, we need to back it up with moves that are going to be most necessary. What are the moves that we'd like to focus and think upon in such a position? Well, that is the big question. What will be the right candidates or the right sets of moves? First and foremost, you need to think about how do you expand down that territory, down that area. Expanding is a great idea. It's just that the problem for most chess players is that they don't know how to do it. And one of the cool concepts now could be a move like f5, queen f6, f4. As long as you could actually focus entirely on that side of the board and forget about the others, you will be very successful, because that side of the board could mean a lot of pieces already placed in there and many different features on. So you need that. In one way or another, it will be very efficient if you could just get more of your forces. And that's a good concept. After that, surely we could do c6d and look for more tactics, but it's nice. So little by little, you understand how we're able to think of a plan. Now, the plan can develop in many different ways. Now, it doesn't have to develop just like that, but it's very interesting. So, like step by step, this is how we reach a good conclusion. Now, let's talk about calculations. Calculations is a subject that most people really hate. And the reason is because there's lots to do with the calculations. I mean, let's suppose that you play Sicilian. We go Sicilian. We go a line that is clearly, something we know. Let's go knight xd4 and knight f6, knight c3. Let's say the knight off, bishop g5 here, f4. We play theoretically knight d7, queen f3. Bishop e7, short castles. We play a line that is well known. h6, bishop h4. Then we have g5. Now, if you know the line by heart, you have no problem. You don't need to calculate. But let's suppose that the opponent deviates. He plays a move like bishop e2. Now, over here, we realize that the position is different. And when it comes down to any committal move, like, for example, the pawn up to the g5, we either need to be really well prepared, or we're not picking that one up. Either way. So it's tricky. How do you make a decision in such a way, in such a position? My suggestion is that you calculate, but calculate always through the opponent's perspective. Never calculate it from your own side. And what I mean by the opponent's perspective, I mean like thinking about what he can do to me, what he could deliver in terms of threats or challenges. If he has got something dangerous that he could do, you want to know about it. You want to be able to figure it out, actually. So, can we do a move like g5 in this position? We could. At least think of it. g5. Again, remember, calculate only from the opponent's perspective. And so if essentially that move happens, white can play f takes the g. And then we go for the move of knight to the e5. White can come down with a move like queen to the e3 to sort of stabilize, and that's actually quite important. There's not too much. Okay, there's knight f to the g4. That's easy when you're calculating. It is really easy to think about the variation when you focus on the forcing moves. Checks, captures, direct threats, those type of things are really important. So you'd like to be analyzing these. Now again, don't calculate it from your side, because your perspective is going to be great. His perspective is what really matters most in these kind of positions. And so for this reason, after the move of queen to the d2, we look at this h takes g, bishop takes g. He's winning a pawn. Okay, now that is not to say that the line is wrong because of it. Maybe we have a chance to make this right, but it's unlikely. It's very unlikely that this will ever go right. And if we capture g5, he's going to like to retake. Knight f2 is going to be met by queen f6, and we've got an extra problem here because of the knight and because of the tactic that's being dropped by him as a resource. So you see, it's tricky. Thinking about a calculation is about setting up goals, thinking about the most attacking and forcing moves, and knowing when to stop. Stopping often requires that you just say, okay, did I get what I wanted, or did I not get it? Did my opponent get the possibilities in such a position? In this particular case, he's definitely going to get them, and we're going to lose. So that's how you want to do it. When you calculate, focus on the goals of each side, the punch counter punch resources that each player can follow up, and more importantly, think about this from the opponent's perspective, because he is the one that who wants to make it successful, and you definitely want to think about this line from his side, from his perspective, so you could see what can possibly happen. So those are my major suggestions. I hope they make sense, but keep in mind that again, a lot of people make mistakes when it comes to following these principles, and I do hope that you get to avoid making mistakes in these critical areas.